Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. And have we got a treat for you today? I always say that, and I don't never tire of saying it because we only have people with lovely big hearts on this show. That's what it's all about. It's touching that heart space. So, welcome to the show, Lynn Deiulis.
Oh, well done, Simon.
My writing, I wrote it down phonetically when we spoke last time, and I rewrote it on this week's pad, this month's pad. So Lynn is from Canada. That's right. We don't have many Canadians on the show. It's normally Americans, a few Brits. I believe who we're having on. We've got some big people. We've got some more international people going. So Lynn, Lynn is an adopted person. That's how you
adult adopted person.
Adult adopted person. Yeah, she is adult. She is not under 18. There are no under 18s on the show at the moment. And you were also a professional in this space. So you're an adoption social worker.
Correct.
And now you're retired, right?
Yes. I have. I'm living the dream.
Living the dream. Living the dream. So last time we spoke, and we've just kind of refreshed it again this morning, we came up with this title for the podcast: how do we talk to our kids about adoption? So why is that important? Why should we be discussing that? Why should we be discussing that topic?
Well, I mean, first of all, we need to respect the children that we are raising. And we need to not be afraid of their history. And so the fear, it definitely is a fear. I think that adoptive parents fear a comparator, fear competition, fear being a less person if the child knows that they were not born to them. It's as if the adoptive parent has done something wrong, and they've not. I mean, first of all, adoption is a wonderful thing, but I, throughout my own mother was terrified when I would bring up adoption, and she would just deer in the headlights. And if we were at the doctor and the doctor would say, "Oh, is there a family history of whatever?" She would give them that stink eye, and out they'd go. They'd leave. She'd motion, and out they'd go and leave the room, mutter out there for a few minutes, and come back in. And I never understood that, because it's not like I didn't know I was adopted. I think, in hindsight, she probably went outside to say, "I have no idea, and I don't want her to know I don't know." That maybe is what was at play, more than anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. My mum was. There's been a change in the way my mum thinks about this stuff, actually, and I don't know whether it's since my dad died like 5 years ago. But yeah, she used to be. I wouldn't say she was terrified, but more just flustered. Mm-hmm. Actually, flustered. But now she's a lot cooler about it. I don't know. So she's seen something different. As you were talking about this, though, I thought it's like adoptees being triggered, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's
absolutely like that.
It's a trigger.
Yeah.
So actually, if you are an adoptive parent listening to this and you feel triggered, you feel the fear around this, then that actually is a bonus, because, well, not a bonus, but that is going to be great for your empathy, because that deep trigger that's being pulled in these scenarios gives you an insight into exactly how not exactly, but a trigger. It gives you an insight into how your adopted kid may feel on certain occasions when people say, "This is triggering." A lot of adult adoptees say that, don't they? Say, "I'm too triggered. I can't." I've had a few recently, a few people that I've asked to come on the podcast. No, I can't come on. It's too triggering. for me.
Mm-hmm.
Too triggering for me.
Yeah. Actually, that leads me to chat a little bit about my mom, who is 97. And I've been visiting with her a little more frequently. We live 7 hours drive apart, so it's not like I can just stop by for tea. But and I got a little bit brave because at one point she didn't know who I was sitting across from her. She thought I was someone else. So she started to tell me the story of how she adopted 2 children, and she was telling me this whole story. And I thought, wow, this is awesome, because she's not afraid. I'm not making her nervous or anxious. She thinks I'm someone else, so she's explaining it. So I took the advantage of by asking some questions. And at one point I said, I remember asking her, so why were you so anxious when I would ask you questions or about being adopted? And I was shocked, Simon, with her response. She said, well, first of all, they didn't tell me very much, so I was afraid you'd ask me something that I should know and didn't. But mostly because I had never been adopted, so I didn't know what you were feeling. I didn't know how to, I couldn't empathize with your being an adopted person. Absolutely blew me out of the water.
Wow.
Here I thought, she was hiding all these secrets and things that she knew, and, all of that. And even at one point, my social information that she was given verbally, because it was, over 60 years ago, she wasn't given anything in writing. And she was told that part of the reason for me being adopted was that I had had a birth brother, brother born to the, sorry, let me back up. What happened was the birth mother had had a boy before me, and that boy was kept by the birth family, by his grandparents, and raised as a sibling. And so when she was pregnant with me, they just had to draw the line. So my whole life, I grew up thinking that boys were better than girls, because they kept the boy and let go of the girl. I had it influenced me, and they kept that baby. And then what was different? What was wrong with me that they let me go, but kept that one? And then years, like fast forward so many years, that I found out that, I was probably 32 when I found out that, in fact, what happened was the grandmother and the birth mother had a baby in the same year. The grandmother had had the boy, and my birth mother had had my older sister. And so look what it did to my life, not having information, right? And so my poor mother, when she found out, that she was mortified that she had brought this fallacy forward my whole life. But she gave me what she knew and what she was told, but she was just gobsmacked when she learned that, as was I. So, and I've since met my older sister, and she was actually placed on adoption in the same community as me. That adoption broke down, unfortunately. But we could have been raised, imagine, we could have been raised in the same small town, not knowing we were sisters, half sisters. Wow. So there's so much there. Imagine my mom having found, if she would have found that out. But it's like that. Those are the questions that, so, if you're an adoptive parent listening, you might not have the answer, but it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that this is what I understand to be part of your story.
So why do people think they have to have the answers? Because it doesn't seem to be just a parent thing. I mean, it's very much a politician thing here in the UK. The politicians can't say, I don't know.
Right.
It's a cultural thing. Not knowing is seen as a big sign of weakness, but actually admitting you don't know is a big sign of strength, isn't it? I mean, it's like, if our knowledge, if our sense of security is based on our knowledge, then there's always new stuff to learn. We're never going to feel secure because we're never going to know anything. It seems, as I say that now, it seems nuts, doesn't it?
Well, it's like it weakens your authority to say, I don't know.
Oh,
Right? It's like, so if I don't know something, then I'm not, I'm not the best mayor you could have voted in, or I'm not the best whatever, or I'm not the best parent to say I don't know. So when as an example, I don't know if it's because I'm an adult adopted person, but when my children would ask me things that I didn't know, what I would say is, I'm not sure. Why don't we look that up? And that leads me to some adoptive parents who will put away the life books or the social and medical history until it's time, quote unquote, to talk to the child. Let me tell you, there is no time to tell your child. The timing is when the child asks the question. So like when your 3-year-old asks you, where do babies come from? You don't get into the physiological explanation. You say, from a mommy's tummy, usually, typically, right? Some people will get into the explanation, and that's fine too. But, so as the child is approaching puberty, you're going to answer that question differently. So, to me, it's look at your child. What stage are they at? What do they want to know about? What's the question really mean? When they say, who is my birth mother? Or have you ever met my birth mother? I mean, the simple answer is no, I didn't, or yes, I did. And she had blonde hair and blue eyes like you, or, she was tall or short, or, and you can do that comparator. And honestly, most children are going to go, okay, and go on with their day.
As I think it must have been something that you talked about last time, because when I don't know, I sometimes have a habit of just rambling on, right? So I'll just go on, and I've just run out of steam, and you were talking about the length of the answers, but I want to go back to the kind of the real the underpinning bit, the deeper bit. Mm-hmm. So I was just chatting to an adoptee, a pre-interview conversation with an adoptee who's going to be on the show fairly soon, maybe from the States, a guy called Bob, and I was listening to him being interviewed by a non-adoptee, right? And nobody with, it's just like an author kind of conversation. And it was quite, they stayed very much on the surface. Mm-hmm. And so the woman asked a question, and he answered the question, and that was that. And then they moved on. And and many times I was craving for them to go a little bit deeper. I was thinking, because the pearls are found at the bottom. And I know you're great at metaphors. You love a metaphor like me. The pearls are at the bottom of the sea, aren't they? So going a little bit deeper. So this phrase that you said about weakening authority, and weakening a parent's authority. Mm-hmm. This is based on. So I've spoken to a lot of adoptive parents, but I've not in the depth of the context and the richness of the moment that you have as an adoption social worker. So what's the thing about a parent's authority and weakening their authority? Where's the depth there? What's the concern? What's the things? What's the elephant in the room? The thing that nobody talks about. Talk to me about parents' sense of authority and weakening their authority. What have you seen? What have you learned in that area?
So what I think happens a lot is that when parents, adoptive parents, adopt because they have to, it has a different impact on authority, because already they feel there's some inadequacy in in them as human beings, because they couldn't create a biological child. Okay? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's how I feel that people feel. So I think that already they're role as a parent, not necessarily their authority, but their role as a parent is a little bit tenuous. And so they bring that into this. So now if you ask questions, then I have to reaffirm the fact that somehow I was inadequate already. Right. And so now I'm going to, sort of reaffirm my inadequacy.
Okay.
And that's why, if you answer them just on the surface quickly, that might be enough.
Okay.
Right. For that moment, did you ever meet my birth mother? I did. Okay. And off they go. Don't chase them and say, but let's talk about that. No, that's enough. Next time they might say, well, when you met my birth mother, was I there? Right. So answering the questions to the best of your knowledge and with honesty, I think matters. But I mean, as parents, we want some measure of authority. We want to be, and kids give us that, right? Like, when my grandchildren come over and I do something that I've done 20 million times, they see me do it and they're like, wow, you know how to do that? I feel good. I feel like I've imparted some wisdom into these little people. And I think that's the authority. Like, I'm not talking about I'm the boss authority. I'm talking about just being a parent. I'm supposed to know stuff. And I'm supposed to be able to share that stuff with you. And this is, I don't know it because no one told it to me.
So as I was thinking, as I was listening to what you're saying, it struck me, I'm a big fan of going upstream, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we talk? Everybody's looking for the how questions, mm-hmm. and that's what we call this podcast. Yeah. How do we talk to our kids about adoption? Yeah. So everybody's looking at the how, everybody's looking at the behavior. Okay. Yeah. So what we need to do is go upstream of the behavior to the feeling. Mm-hmm. So there might be a feeling of insecurity, mm-hmm. for example, or there might be, you mentioned the word fear a few times. So if we can't say how to talk to kids about adoption, we have to go upstream of the how to how we're feeling, insecure, some feelings of insecurity, feelings of fear, and then upstream of the feelings are the thoughts that are driving those feelings. So that the thought might be, I'm not, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen if this conversation goes pear-shaped, right? So we're looking to the thoughts. And so where are our predominant thoughts? Usually, where are our thoughts coming from? They're going from our sense of ourselves, our identity, mm-hmm. our what did you use the word tenuous? Our kind of so I would use the word. The thing that comes to my mind is grounding. Our grounding, how secure we are in ourselves, how much authority we've got of ourselves, how much self-confidence we've got in ourselves, and that for me is the area for us all to go in all situations. And what an adoptive mum came on the show last year, Holly Ann Petrie, and her title was Unpacking Our Own Baggage as Adoptive Parents. So what she was talking about there, she was talking about unpacking our own baggage is essentially getting to that strong sense of grounding and peace with ourselves, and grounding, and that's the place to go. That's what the more conscious adoptive parents tell me, is it's all about us. Mm-hmm. So that seems to be, to me, the place to go. That's where I hang out.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the strongest part of a package is the bottom, right? You always make sure, like any package that you get, it has, extra tape on the bottom. It's, that's where we focus. So, the bottom line. But the one thing I will say is that society encourages the insecurities of adoptive parents.
Oh,
I mean, if you think of it, oh, so you identify that this is my child, and say it's obvious an adoption, say it's parents of color and a white child, or something of that nature, and then so you say, and what they will say is, oh, you couldn't have children of your own. That is such a common phrase and such a disrespectful phrase in my point of view, because if this is not your child, whose child is it? This is my child. If I'm the adoptive parent, this is my child. Don't ask me or don't identify that I can't have children of my own, right? So it, like, just predominantly in society, adoptive parents are already treated differently. So bing, there's your first insecurity caused by us. I mean, people will debate that with me and say, finding out about infertility is probably your first bing. There's probably a lot of first bings for every family is different, but these are your children. And when they ask you questions, you need to ask them, you need to answer them, I feel, with the authority of the fact that you are their parent. And adopting parents used to ask me, so at what age should I tell them, Lynn? And I say they should always know. They should always know. Your life book shouldn't be something that's up in the closet. You say, oh, one day, honey, I'll take that book down and you can have a look at it. Maybe you want to take it out in pages instead of the whole book, because there's pictures, say, of the biological family. But if you, as adoptive parents, normalize that book, it's normal for your child. If you fearfully go and, reach back and unpack, if you will, this box out of wherever you've hidden it and take it out like it's some secret, then that reflects on how you're feeling. So to me, that information is the child's information, and you're the gatekeeper. Yeah. And so feel free to let them in. And so, and if you always acknowledge their adoption status, and if you correct people and say, there's a book, I'm struggling to remember the name of the book, but in it, someone asks a foster parent in a park who has a bunch of children, say, oh, can you tell me who the real children are? And she just turns and says something like, well, they're all real. I don't have any invisible children. Isn't that amazing? It's just an amazing way to answer it, like, because really it's a silly question, isn't it? Which ones are your real children? Yeah. You couldn't have children of your own. That's just so silly, and it's something that I think inspires adoptive parents to feel insecure.
I wanted to talk about this in terms of how if we can see where the insecurities, as you say, society encourages insecurity. The society, obviously, most of the time, not most of the time, there's a lot of time these days that society spend their time time on social media. I wanted to read something that I got from somebody that attended one of my talks, right? And I just wanted to read it to emphasize how visible and yet invisible some of this stuff is, right? And how societal it is. I have a 10-year-old adopted daughter, and absolutely loved your talk on we are family. It was such a breath of fresh air after all the stuff I had been reading on Twitter about the horrors from adopted people. Not taking away from the trauma and difficulties inherent in the concept of adoption, I wanted you to thank you for offering your own self-determination narrative. It gives me hope for my daughter and possibility of a different narrative to the dominant one on Twitter. So I am not blowing that I'm not saying that to blow my own trumpet. I'm reading that for you listeners to realize how it's not actually just adoptive. Sorry, it's just what do we call them? Non-adoptive parents that are going to throw this rubbish at you. I nearly swore then. It's actually you're going to get it from adoptees as well. And before we started talking, before we started the recording today, Lynn and I were talking about some adoptees out there, adoptee influences, believing that no adoptee is whole or can ever be whole. And so they are being led by people who are in, what should we say, still really suffering. So we need to be aware that it's coming at you from all sides, is this stuff, and you need to be aware of that, because once you're aware of it, I guess you've got a better chance of being able to shrug it off, right? I don't know. Does that make it was a bit? It's a bit tangential, but to me, I don't know. It seems bang on the money, or else I wouldn't have gone on that ramble.
Well, I think you're so I'll flip that a little bit. First of all, thank you for not saying real parents, because that's another societal hit. When you're an adoptive parent, oh, do you think they'll ever want to find their real parents? And what I'd love for adoptive parents to say at that point is, you're looking at her or you're looking at him. I am the real parent, right? So I know what they mean. We all know what they mean, but it's still a condescending thing. So when you say, what you were just speaking about, that adult adopted people are somehow not whole, it's, is anyone really completely whole? We all have life experiences. And I think what the difference with adoption is, some people and society don't embrace it's just a life experience. It's, looking at the term real, for example, if do you know somebody that's divorced? Would you ever say, oh, do you keep in touch with your real wife?
Oh,
I mean, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's the same damn thing, but they don't. Oh, sorry. It's the same darn thing. But right. So, and it's about a point of view. And my point of view is, children should know that they're adopted, be proud that they're adopted, and be part. They are your family. This is your family. How it became, even with a stepchild, they don't. I've never, in my experience, seen anyone say to a child who's going to visit their mother, "Are you going to? Oh, so is it your weekend for your real mother?" I've never heard that. I don't know if you have, Simon.
no.
Right? So why is it acceptable for adoption? And I think adoptive parents need to, quietly and respectfully just correct people, because some people are just doing it in pure ignorance. They, not to be ignorant, but they are ignorant of what that means. And so to educate people, when they say real parents, correct them. Or oh, sorry, do you mean their birth parents? I'm sure when they're old enough, they might want to have some interest in that. But we're afraid to correct people. And so your child sees that. And so then they become afraid, so are we ever whole? Yes, we're whole. I mean, as whole as a human being can be. I don't think that, I struggle with that, but I struggle with a lot of things I've read professionally and personally. And that's fine. That's people's opinion. But I want people to be comfortable in talking to their children, because you know what? There's so many cool things about adoption. You got some things, like you might be the only singer in your family, because in your birth family there was significant talent in singing, and they gave that to you. That's a gift they gave to you, a genetic gift. So as the adopted family, I mean, if the child can sing and no one encourages that, they'll stop singing.
Yeah. So
that's where I'm afraid of. Let's not make our kids stop singing.
what helps adoptive parents see this grounding? What helps? I mean, I love your metaphor of the tape on the bottom of the box, right?
Mhm.
So what helps them see that for themselves?
Honestly, Simon, I think I think adoptive parents need to look at themselves more as a family and not as a family that the way other people see them. Except that your 3-year-old runs to you calling mommy, 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 or daddy, daddy, daddy. That's who you are. That's who you are, because it's a role, right? Giving birth is a biological act. Raising a child is a role. That's where the hard work comes in. I think there's no one who would argue that with me. And so I think acknowledging that and feeling confident and correcting people, that's the hardest part, because like, you have adoptive parents go through hell to get approved, and other families aren't torn apart like that before they come together and are granted the privilege of being a parent.
Yeah.
It just happens, it happens biologically. So it doesn't make you less of a person because your child came to you through adoption. It makes you a stronger person. You had to work so much harder than everyone else, and your child should see that you're proud of that, right?
So I don't think anybody in society is any very good at. I talk about myself here as well, right? We're not good at seeing our strengths. We're not good at accepting compliments. We're not good at yeah, we don't focus on our strengths. We've got a
No.
media that's obsessed with scaring the bejesus out of us. We've got social media that's either terrorizing us or showing us these impossible happy families. As what do people say? I heard a great um, metaphor for this. People are only showing their show reels on social
Mhm.
media. They're not showing real life. They're just showing the edited highlights.
Yep.
Edited highlights. Um, and what helps us see our strengths is seeing our strengths. I and maybe seeing where the voice in our head is pulling us down, shouting us out. I think a lot of us. Sorry, I'm speaking for myself here. A lot of us try to drown out that voice in our heads rather than ignoring it. So we actually go to war. We go to war with the voice in our head. You're not a good parent. You're not a good parent. I'm not a good parent. I am a good parent, and it's like what a friend of mine called Richard Wilkins talks about, the civil war in our head.
Mhm.
Um, what have you seen from your work with adoptive parents around that stuff?
Well, I think when I was also a reunion counselor when they needed to do that back in the day. So parents had to, birth parents had to meet with me, and the adult adopted person had to meet with me before they could meet each other. And so the number one fear for the adult adopted person that I came across personally in my work was, how do I tell my parents? Isn't that ironic?
Yeah,
Right? So their greatest fear was disappointing their adoptive parents. Their issue was not with their birth parent. Their birth parent was a curiosity. And then they might have built a relationship with them, or, it depends. That can go so many ways. And even in my own reunion experience, I was raised as a younger sister to my brother. Both of us adopted people. And so I've met my oldest sister, half sister, and I've met a number of, other, like I've met birth paternal half siblings and maternal half siblings. If you want to talk birth order, I'm a complete mess, because I don't fit any of that, right? But honestly, if I am a little sister to my brother, that's who the person is that you're speaking with. And I've had the privilege of meeting all these other folks, but to me, to be my sister, we needed to have been raised together. So technically you're my sister. So I think, those are the conversations to have. But yeah, these kids, these adult kids, are terrified of telling their adoptive parents, not because for the same fear, I believe, that somehow by meeting another faction, or by acknowledging another faction, somehow it makes you lesser. And I'm here to say, like, my relationship with my brother that's my brother. I'm freer to say to him what I would normally say to a brother. All of that happens. I don't have that with my other siblings, right? And so it's all a fear if we let it. It's all a fear if we let it. So, to me, start young, start when your children are young, asking those, you don't give them big elaborate stories, just like you don't about, the birds and the bees. Little chunks, because it shows you're not afraid. It shows that you're not threatened by this other set of parents. It shows that you're not threatened by how this child came into your family. It shows that you're the parent, and that's who you are. You're their parent. Nothing can take that away.
My mum and dad told me with a storybook, and I'm sure they told me before I could even, and I'm sure they read that story to me before I had a clue what was going on.
Yep.
And I think nobody likes surprises, and I've talked about this before, and I haven't really got more to say to it than that. But the earlier, the better. And before they can, would anybody would parents think about sharing the? So I think my parents, I'm like 99% sure they told me before I could actually understand what they were telling me. And as I say that, I think, well, so that was a good audience to play to, right? I wasn't arguing back.
Yep.
So even reading the story, they're getting into practice for when. Does that make any sense? I don't know.
It does, because you knew what adoption was before it applied to you. And the surprise only came about when you realized, oh, wait, that's me. It wasn't.
I don't even remember that surprise.
Right. Yeah. So if you're gonna, it's because, right, it was normalized.
It was normalized.
Yeah. Yeah. And to have books around, like, there's so many books today that we wouldn't have had when we were growing up, but so many books out there to talk about different families. They talk about kinship, grandparents raising kids, customary care. All of those things are in books now. So fill your house with those. They're great tools for starting the conversation.
Why does normalization? And I genuinely, I don't know the answer to this question, right? Sometimes I have a clue for, but why does normalizing make things easier?
It mitigates the surprise, right? It mitigates the surprise. So if you've heard adoption, and you've heard the word adoption, then it applies to you. You're kind of like, oh, okay, it's like the book about the big red dog or whatever, that, oh, okay, that's like me. So it mitigates that shock. So not only you're not learning the term adoption suddenly, and combined with learning that applies to you. So that's what I mean by normalizing. It's just a fact of, that's just the way some families are created.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to you I'm thinking about, from what does that, and the so what is, I'm not different, because nobody wants to be different, do they? Like, especially,
but yet we all are.
yeah, yeah,
right? We all are
yeah, we
different,
all
but we're
are.
afraid to accept that and acknowledge that. And that's you went back to, everybody on the reels looks the same. They have the same kind of kitchen. They use the same marble countertops. Like it's all the same, but yet they want to be unique. But we're all there.
Yeah. I was thinking of that. Um, yeah, all uniquely different.
Mhm.
I was thinking about the kind of the alone thing. Like people talk about this, don't they? So like shame is
Mhm.
kind of one of the lowest points of our mood.
Mhm.
And so a lot of adoptive parenting coaches and stuff like that have said to me about the difference between time out and time in. So
Yes.
don't send your kid away because that's shame, right? Time in is spending time with them rather than sending them away, which makes stunning sense.
Mhm.
The go to your room thing, be on your own. I tell you what, you're obviously this is the logic in parenting in the 60s. You're obviously feeling upset, and so I want you to go into your room, where you are going to stew on it, feel bad about yourself, wonder about what you did wrong, um, question what your parents are going on, and is it any wonder? Do you know what I mean? It's nuts, isn't it? Time
Yeah.
out versus time in. But I was thinking about the feeling of being alone, and that kind of is it the reptilian brain? The one the antelope that is alone from the pack is going to get picked off by the lion. That feeling of aloneness. And so what normalizing adoption does through the books, is make it stops the adopted child feeling othered. People say that, don't they, at the moment? Othered.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
you othered me.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. Okay. So I'm conscious of time,
Yes.
and
Yes.
we've talked about books, and
Mhm.
we didn't say at the start. I didn't say that you're an author as well as a adult adopted parent and an ex adoption social worker. So tell us about your book.
So when I retired, I decided I would like to, because I've always looked for resources that give the message we've been talking about for the last little bit, to help adoptive parents talk to their kids about being adopted. And so I decided, like, the book was not in a book form. It was always in a kind of pamphlet form. I've always been, I'll write those up when I was getting people ready for adoption, all that, little life stories and stuff. I've always been writing that stuff. So I decided I would do this pamphlet for my colleagues, my adoption worker colleagues that I was leaving. And I had the time, so I reached out to one of my birth half sisters, maternal birth half sister, who's a graphic artist. And I said, hey, could you just like draw me an image of a caterpillar and a butterfly? And when she sent that to me, Simon, the book just went, wow, it forms into a book. I mean, I never intended for it to be a book, but and she kept sending it to me in like page forms. And a little funny thing is, the first time she did a cover, she wrote, the first in a series. I said, you take that off. I identify that as pressure. But yeah, and then spoke to I showed it to a couple of adoptive parents. I showed it to a children's mental health worker, and we worked through some of the bugs that they had pointed out. And I mean, it was COVID, so
Yeah.
there was a lot of time on people's hands. And so decided spoke to an author who was originally from Timmins, from my hometown, and asked him about a publication and stuff. So and then
Yeah.
we published it. The book is not a story, it's a journey. So it's separated into chapters where you read the chapter, and then I separated it, both a pro and a con, with little activities so that you could naturally stop. If you or the child were feeling emotional or overwhelmed, then you just say, okay, well, let's do the word search and, off to bed or whatever, and then bring it back out. Or if you wanted to talk about their time in foster care, you might start at that chapter. The book doesn't have to be read necessarily in order, except for the introduction.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's a practical tool to help you along your journey, yeah.
Exactly. It's a tool. So it's just to break that ice if you need the ice broken. And again, if you had this book, you might just purchase it, have it on the bookshelf. Don't purchase it, sit down and say, hey, we're going to talk about adoption today. Just have it around so they're familiar. Then they might, look at it. The pictures are so beautiful that it's going to attract a child to see it anyway, or to ask about it. But it's so, and if it's okay, Simon, I just want to point out that the error I did, or what I didn't think about, was multiple children in a family when we designed the activity portion. So the activities between the chapters are available on my website that people can download and print if they have more than one kiddo.
Okay. Cool. So thank you very much, Lynn.
Got it.
She's having having a coughing fit.
Yeah. Because
drink.
I am.
It is too early in the day in Canada for alcohol. I'm sure it's coffee or water or something. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. It's too early, Simon.
Too early. Well, it's about time for me to have a bottle of beer here because it's 5:15.
There you go.
So as always, listeners, that on the show notes there are links to every guest's website and socials, and obviously we'll put a link to the book as well, and the activity sheets that Lynn has mentioned, so that you can have a look at that. Is there a question that I've not asked you? Now it's time for my coughing fit. Sorry.
Okay, go for it. Just don't open your beer.
No. So is there something that I've not mentioned, Lynn, that you'd like me to?
No, I think we've covered, I feel like, a bit of a soapbox, but that's what this podcast is an opportunity to stand on that soapbox. I just think, trust your kids, trust that they can take the information, trust that you are their parent. And, no matter what anyone else tells them, because people will have things to say. And, and maybe I'll conclude with a quick little story. In grade 8, a colleague a colleague's mother was expecting a baby. And so you can imagine how ferociously in grade 8 we were teasing this young lady about how this baby got into there. And she was just, poor thing. We were relentless, because that's what children do, sadly. Anyway, at one point she turned around, she finally had it, and she snapped and turned around and looked at me and said, your parents do it too. And I quickly looked right back at her and said, no, don't be silly. I'm adopted. My parents don't have to do that. So you see, your children will defend themselves even if you're not around. But so it's, make it fun. It's a privilege having been adopted. And, my brother used to always say, yeah, your parents were stuck with you. I got chosen. So, so we had a good attitude, I think. I mean, a little facetiously, but I think by now at this time, if you've listened this long, my sense of humor. So
yeah, it's great. I was talking to an adoptive mum yesterday, and we were talking about me doing some more talks for her organization, and she said, one of the challenges is, Simon, that you're a bit different to most adoptees, and like you come on a little bit bright and breezy, and And I'm thinking, so they're worried, like, a comparison. Comparison is a funny thing, isn't it? Another conversation I had yesterday. I was talking to an adoptee who'd been through absolute. My life was a walk in the park, and I was kind of like saying, my life's been a walk in the park. Yours has been hell on earth for quite a lot. And he or she, I can't remember who it was. They said it's not the comparison Olympics, Simon. And I thought, yeah, you're spot on. You're spot on. You're spot on. You're spot on. Yeah, I was trying to. I had there was a nice comparison quote, a deep and profound comparison quote somewhere in the back of my brain. I thought it might pop into the front of my brain, but it hasn't. So thank you very much for coming on the show, Lynn, and thank you very much, listeners, for listening as ever. And we will speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.